So 25th, the lecture was cancelled because I was busy in exam duty, and 23rd, we discussed about clock distribution techniques in great detail, and we discussed about H tree method, balance tree method, driver chain method, and hierarchical tree method. Okay, so this was the H tree recursive structure which we discussed. Then we discussed about balance tree structures. So H tree structure, as we told, it makes the clock skew or clock delay more predictable, and balance tree structure, it makes the delays or skew more balanced. And then we had the driver chain method, where we introduced the concept of differently sized inverters, and we defined the size of a MOSFET as W upon L, also known as aspect ratio, while the area of MOSFET is defined as width into length. And then we also justified mathematically how the current carrying ability of a MOSFET, it actually is proportional to the size, that is W by L ratio, using this particular equation. So we saw that in the saturation region, the drain current is proportional to W by L, where K dash and VDS sat are constants. So we concluded that the current carrying ability of a MOSFET in saturation region is a function of its size or W by L ratio. And we gave some examples also. And then with the hierarchical tree method, where we told that according to what is the size of the load to be driven, the current carrying ability of the MOSFET stage can be actually controlled by simply changing the W by L ratio. So this was the discussion last time. And today we are going to discuss about two important topics in the syllabus: clock jitter and supply and ground bounds. So clock jitter and supply and ground bounds are two very important topics, interesting, analytical. At the same time, almost every year one of these questions is asked in the exam. So it's also important from that viewpoint. Okay. So first we will jot down some theory about clock jitter. Then using instructive waveforms, we are going to actually explain what is clock jitter. Okay, fine. Okay. So clock jitter we will abbreviate as CJ. So wherever I have to write the clock jitter, I can use abbreviation. So CJ refers to the temporal variation of clock jitter refers to the temporal variation of clock period. So we'll refer the clock period as, because in electronics we know that the capital T is used to represent clock period of a periodic waveform, while small t is used to represent time. Okay, so clock jitter refers to the temporal variation of clock period denoted as TCLK at a given node of a chip. Okay, so clock jitter refers to the temporal variation of clock period TCLK at a given node of a chip. Now, what is temporal variation? So I'll use the right color. So temporal variation is nothing but variation as a function of time. Variation as a function of time t. Okay. Third important point is the above variation takes the form of reduction or increase in the value of TCLK, that is a clock period, on a cycle to cycle basis. Okay, very important. Okay, so clock jitter refers to the temporal variation of clock period TCLK at a given node of a chip. By temporal variation, we refer to variation as a function of time t, and the above variation takes the form of either reduction or increase in the value of TCLK on a cycle to cycle basis. Okay. Now, jitter, I can say clock jitter is strictly a temporal uncertainty measure, is strictly a temporal measure and is usually specified at a given node of a chip. Okay, so by chip I mean integrated circuit or the wafer, or where the electronic circuitry has been laid out or fabricated. Okay, now jitter is a zero mean random variable. It is a zero mean right. So we know that in statistics we have mu is mean, rho is standard deviation, and rho square is variance. Okay, so we can plot a graph here. So we have 0. Okay, so this is 0. Okay, so this is called as standard normal distribution. This is okay. And the last fact about clock jitter is what are the sources of clock jitter. So clock jitter has many sources. Thermal noise, ground bounce, power supply noise, we have crosstalk and reflections. Okay, and clock jitter is usually measured as, this is very important, as change in the clock period between two adjacent clock cycles over a collection of 1000 clock cycles. Okay, so clock jitter is usually measured as change in the time period TCLK between two adjacent clock cycles over a collection of 1000 clock cycles. Okay, now we define what are the different types of jitters available. Now the discussion is going to become more mathematical. Types of clock jitter. So here we have absolute jitter, and it is denoted as T jitter, and it is defined as worst case variation of clock edges. So it's not an edge. Worst case variation of clock edges at a node with respect to ideal or reference or original clock edge. It's very important. Okay, so here absolute jitter denoted as small t jitter is worst case variation of clock edges with respect to ideal clock edge. Okay, similarly the second kind of jitter which we have is called as cycle to cycle jitter, and it is denoted as T jitter, capital T. Okay, and it is defined as time varying deviations of time varying deviations of single clock period with respect to ideal or reference or original edge. Okay, so time varying deviations of single clock period with respect to ideal clock edge. Okay, fine. So now we go into the mathematics of the discussion. At a given node in a chip, now this is a little mathematical. T I superscript jitter n is equal to T superscript I CLK comma n plus 1 minus T superscript I CLK comma n minus T CLK. Okay, so here TI CLK n plus 1 and TI CLK comma n, these two are defined as arrival instance of n plus 1th and nth clock edges at node I. Okay, so arrival instance of n plus 1th and nth clock edges at node I. Okay, and as usual TCLK continues to remain original clock period. Okay, yeah. Okay, so this is our original clock period. This is our original clock period. So this is my TCLK, and here what can happen in jitter, this edge can come inside, similarly this edge can come inside. Okay, and the new edges would be like this. Similarly The same way, this edge can go away and this edge can also go away. So now what we do is that we will give names to the edges. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. So now we have pairs. We have the first pair black in color 1 and 2. The second pair we have 3, 4 and third we have 5, 6. So we clearly see that the numbers 1, 2 they represent the original clock cycle or the original clock period TCLK, and 3, 4 it represents the worst case jitter, that is the clock frequency has been reduced, while 5, 6 it represents another pair of jitter affected edges. So I can say that 1, 2 represent the unaffected edges of the clock, and 3, 4 and 5, 6 they represent the jitter affected edges. So we will write everything. Okay. Original clock period 3, 4 and 5, 6 jitter affected edges. Worst case jitter. Okay. Now we will quantify this. We will say that this particular interval is called as T jitter. Okay. So assuming that a particular operation is performed once per cycle of the clock. So now we are assuming that a particular operation in the circuit is occurring or it is being executed once per cycle of the clock. Then we know that in case of the worst case jitter represented by the combination 3, 4, the time available will now be reduced. So we'll write that. Can anybody tell what will be the time available for operation in case of worst case jitter? Yes. What is the time available for operation in case of worst case jitter?
Sir, TCLK minus 2T jitter.
Okay, yeah. Okay, correct. For worst case jitter, time available for execution is equal to original clock period minus 2 times t jitter. Okay, now let us assume a system which is sequential in nature. Okay, and it has a combinational cloud somewhere here. Combo logic, and this combo logic is feeding. It has its own set of inputs, say IN, and the system is having edge triggering from the clock. Okay, and this is the output, say Q. So remember one thing, that this combo logic is going to offer a delay called as T logic. At the clock's input there is one more delay called as TSU, called as setup time. And there is also one more delay called as TCQ. It is called as clock to Q delay. Okay, so TCQ is called as clock to Q delay. T logic is the delay offered by the combinational logic, and there is setup delay also. Now time available for execution is TCLK in minus 2 times the time jitter, and this much time is available. So within this time which is available, all the operations have to perform. So we can write that TCLK minus 2 times jitter, this must be greater than or equal to summation of setup time delay plus clock to Q delay plus combinational delay. Okay, or we can also write down TCLK should be greater than or equal to T setup plus clock to Q delay plus combo delay plus 2 times T jitter. So this entire bracket consisting of 4 terms, it represents the minimum delay in the circuit. So that is why I can represent this as TCLK, that is why should be greater than TD min. Okay, therefore I can very well tell that FCLK should be less than equal to 1 over TD min. This is very important. Okay, so I can say in another words, this particular thing, it determines the maximum allowable clock frequency. Okay, it's very clear that if this clock jitter concept was not there, if suppose the clock jitter is absent in the system, that means the value of FCLK can increase more. Okay, it's very clear. So if clock jitter is not present, then the FCLK should be only less than equal to 1 over setup time plus TCQ plus T logic. Okay, it's like that. So more the denominator increases, lesser will be the value of FCLK. That is why we can directly conclude that the concept of clock jitter actually limits the maximum operating frequency of the clock. I hope that things are very clear till now, because there is a mathematical expression to this. Okay, so this is what comprises the topic of clock jitter. Now we go to the second topic, which is also equally interesting, that is supply and ground bounds. Okay, yeah. So I'll not be explaining supply bounds because it is similar to ground bounds. So we'll just explain ground bounds first. And if you understand ground bounds properly, exactly the reverse of that is called as supply bounds. Okay, fine. So before I explain the technicalities, okay, I will draw one diagram here. So all of us know when we were kids, we always played with bouncing balls. So if suppose I raise a particular rubber ball to height h above the ground, and then I drop the ball under gravity. So we know that the ball will hit the ground, and then it will go little up, then again it will hit the ground, it will go up, hit the ground, go up, and ultimately it will come to resting position after some time. This is what we know, is it not? Yeah. So if we see that this particular height, the maximum height which is attained by the ball after every bounce, it goes on reducing. Is it okay? So we can see that the trend is like this. Okay, so this is called as a bounce. Okay, it's called as a concept of bounce. So this is also exactly what happens when the output of an inverter circuit, either changes from 1 to 0 or 0 to 1. Okay, if you remember this diagram, so you'll appreciate at the end of the discussion why I started my explanation using the example of a ball which is raised to a height h, and then it is allowed to fall under gravity. Yeah. Now we see that system designers use advanced logic families to achieve better performance. Okay, but then we know that performance also comes at a cost. But comes at a cost. So if I try to increase the speed, then also the power dissipation increases. Or if I want to lower power dissipation, then also I have to add to it reduced operating frequency. Okay, especially this is the case with CMOS logic family. because CMOS logic family is very famous for very low power dissipation of operation, but also its operating frequency is low. So depending upon what application we want, if we want very low power dissipation, then we should pay the price of lower operating frequency. But this was a fact about CMOS logic family before many years. The current day CMOS logic families which are available, they have operating frequencies at par and actually better than bipolar logic family. Okay, it's very very important. So it is a thing of the past that CMOS logic family cannot operate at higher frequencies. But now we can say that modern day CMOS family operates as fast as bipolar while maintaining merit of lowest power dissipation. Okay, so we already discussed this before. For CMOS logic, the dynamic power dissipation, that is when the input is constantly switching, is given as load capacitance into output voltage swing square into the frequency of clock. And we know that CMOS logic gives rail to rail output. Rail to rail output. So rail to rail output basically means that when the output is logic 1, that means the output is actually plus VDD volts, and when the output is logic 0, that means it is actually minus VSS, or it is actually 0 volt. That is why in case of CMOS logic family, our output voltage swing is actually VDD minus 0 whole square into FCLK. That is why we have CL into the supply voltage square into the clock frequency. Okay, so currently FCLKs are of the order of 2 to 3 gigahertz. We know that. Okay, so while achieving very high performance, the problem is that the ground bound becomes more prominent. Okay, so we can say with increasing clock frequencies, the problem of ground bounds, we can say ground and bounds, has become more prominent. Okay, fine. Now we consider a CMOS inverter. This will be interesting for you. Consider a CMOS NOT gate driving load capacitance CL. Okay, fine. So we have okay. So now we have source, drain, drain of NMOS, source of NMOS, gate of PMOS, gate of NMOS, and here we have our input Vin, and from here comes output, which, as I said, is driving a capacitive load CL. Okay, so here we have our load voltage VO. Okay, now understand this thing. Now I'll zoom it and I will show it to you. We are defining 2 points X and Y. Okay, I will write what is X and what is Y. Okay, so X is technically called as IDG, internal device ground, and Y is called as external device ground, external system ground. I'm very sorry. Okay, so X is internal device ground and Y is external system ground. So we'll also abbreviate them IDG and ESG. Okay, so some facts. What are why are IDG and ESG defined? So please understand one thing, that the device, device means MOSFET. So device inputs and outputs are referenced to internal device ground, while Vin, so Vin usually comes from signal generator, so Vin is referenced to external system ground. Okay, so sorry, so device inputs and outputs are referenced to IDG, while signal generator is referenced to ESG. Okay, now I'm going to redraw this, but I'm going to consider a parasitic effect which is there. So see how I do it. Same circuit I'll draw, but I'm going to add something. Okay, so draw the device also here. drain. Similarly, I will draw NMOS, source of NMOS, drain of NMOS, draw the ground, VDD, inductance. Okay. Rest remains the same. V in, and from here I take the output, but here again I am going to draw one more inductance. And the names will be L1, L2, L3. Okay. So here L1 is inductance of ground lead. L2 is inductance of supply lead, and L3 inductance of output lead. Fine. And now here, just like we defined the points x and y as IDG and ESG, we have to actually denote the points here also. So I'm zooming it and I have to denote the same points here. Okay. So this is my point X, this is point Y. Okay. Are you able to see the difference now? Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yeah, we are able to see that X and Y are directly connected in figure number 1, but X and Y now have an inductance L1 in between. So it is very, very clear that the potential difference between X and Y in figure number 1 is 0. But now the potential difference between X and Y in figure number 2, that is in the parasitic circuit, is actually equal to the voltage across the inductance. Okay. So I can redraw that much part here. So okay. So here I have my source of NMOS, and here I have my ground, and there is a direct connection between them here. X and Y. So I can write down that in this case Vxy is equal to 0, and in second case, that is circuit number 2, say source can say here that here Vxy is equal to voltage across L1, which is not equal to 0. Okay, so this two circuit diagrams can technically be called as like this. This is called as grounded reference. This is called as a raised reference. Okay, yeah. So now we are going to assume that the input in figure number 2 or 1, whatever it is actually changing. Okay, so I'm assuming that the input here is 0 and it is changing to 1. Similarly, we know that when input Vin is equal to 0, the output Vo was equal to 1, and when input goes from 0 to 1, the output is going to go from 1 to 0. Okay, so Vin is going from 0 to 1, so output is going to go from 1 to 0. Okay, so here the concept of ground bounce comes. That is, here we define that how the ball when raised to height goes on attaining lower and lower heights till actually it settles to 0. Similarly, here we can also write that the output of a circuit. So as such, if we see in an inverter, if Vin is this, okay, if Vin is this and this is V out, so if input is 0, okay, fine. So if input is riding like this and it goes from 0 to 1. 1, then ideally the output of inverter should actually come down like this, but actually it doesn't come down, it actually comes down like this. Okay, so this and this are actually same. That is what called as a ground bounce. Similarly, if I take a case where Vin is actually going from 1 to 0. Okay, so if it is going from 1 to 0 like this, naturally the output has settled this thing, so it is supposed to immediately go from 0 to 1, but actually doesn't go, it actually will go like this, reverse bounce kind of a thing. Okay, we will see how it happens in the circuit. Okay, now I'm going to reproduce this particular part of the circuit. Only this much part of the circuit I am going to reproduce here. So VO zero goes to 1, V out was equal to 1 and goes to 0. Okay, naturally this CL will be charged to plus VDD. That is logic 1. And when the Vin becomes equal to 1, at that time NMOS becomes on. Okay, so Vin equal to 0, PMOS equal to on, and MOS equal to off. V in equal to 1, PMOS equal to off, NMOS equal to on. Okay. So here we can represent in the on state that the on state resistance of NMOS is equal to Rn. Okay. So we'll represent Rn. I can say Rn is on state resistance of NMOS. Read out the circuit now. Fine. So now the capacitor is going to now start discharging from VDD towards ground in order to achieve an output going from logic 1 to logic 0. So this is the capacitor current IC, and we have to also know what is the value of voltage across inductor. So we know that IC is always equal to C into dV by dt, and we also know that VL is equal to L into di by dt, right? So for capacitor current we are going to differentiate the voltage, and for inductor voltage we are going to differentiate the current. Okay, the same thing we will do. We'll draw axis now. VO So here the capacitor discharges proportional to the time constant Rn into Cl. You know this. Suppose this is that. So the capacitor current is C into dV by dt. So naturally we are going to get waveforms like this. It is constant here. So I will have like this. And because the inductor voltage is L into di by dt, it is going to create spikes now. Okay, one spike here, another spike here. Fine. Okay, so as we told here that Vxy is equal to VL.
दादा क्लास हो गई क्या? नहीं हुई?
A similar explanation can be given when Vin changes from 1 to 0 and VO changes from 0 to 1 and will be called as supply bounce. Okay. Fine. So we have covered both the topics today. I know it was lengthy, but I wanted to cover both the topics, that is why.